Well, last week we saw that because Joseph was the favoured son, he became the despised brother. His father, we noticed, loved him more than any of his other sons and gifted him with a multicoloured coat. Seeing their father's favouritism, the brothers boiled with their hatred, fuelled by jealousy for Joseph. Now, over 100 miles away from home, Joseph has gone out seeking his brothers, and he finds them. And what does he say to them? What's he doing at seeking them? He's going because he has been sent from his father to see whether they are doing well. And over 100 miles from home, the hatred of his brothers finally comes boiling over onto the surface. As they saw their brother coming near, they take him, they strip him of his coat, they throw him in a ditch, and they sell him to slave traders passing by. And you thought your week was bad. Joseph is taken down to Egypt, south. So he's gone up north from where he lives, and now he's made a journey right back down south into Egypt, way past his own home where his father and brothers live. And while he's being taken down to Egypt, his brothers make their way back to Hebron. His brothers bring the coat, which they have dipped in blood, and they present it to their father. Their father, recognizing the coat, makes the conclusion that Joseph has been killed by a wild animal. As we looked at those events, I wonder whether you went away with the question I went away with after studying those verses. What question should be on our lips at this point? I wonder if you have ever asked, where was God? Where was God? Actually, in those verses in chapter 37, you'll struggle to find him. Where was God? Where was God when Joseph was being hated by his brothers? Where was God when Joseph had been taken by force and thrown into a pit and being left to die? Where was God? Where was God when his brothers had the callous idea to bring him up out of the pit and to sell him like property to some strangers? Where was God? Where was God when Joseph was going down to Egypt and his brothers were lying to their father? Where was God? Perhaps you've had life circumstances where you've asked that same question. You've perhaps had a week or a month or years like that where you have been left wondering, where God have you been? It's true, isn't it, that we often think that God is with us whenever everything's going well, when our work is being successful or our home life is in the right order and there's no frustrations and everything's happy, when just life seems to be carefree. But when things are going wrong at least according to our own standards, it's at that time we may look and go, well, where is God? Where are you? Well, the answer actually comes to us in chapter 39. The answer comes in chapter 39. Where was God? God was with Joseph all the way. And today, as we look at Joseph, the righteous servant in Potiphar's home, I want us to see that reality. I want us to be assured of this, that God, if you are a Christian here this morning, if you have come to faith in Jesus Christ, whether things are going well or whether things are going wrong. God is always with you. God is always with you. And yes, that does at times mean that we are found in situations that we would not choose for ourselves. So I want us to think this morning, well, what can we expect when God is with us? What can we expect? What might life look like when God is with his people? I've got 3 things from this passage. Firstly, notice that when God is with us, we will be blessed. We will be blessed. Yeah, we can hardly imagine, can we, what it was like for Joseph being taken down as a slave to Egypt. He would have arrived in this place, and one of the very first things that would have happened to him is he would have been presented for the marketplace. It's likely he would have been stripped of all of his clothing, and he would have then been paraded in the marketplace in front of a number of people who are very wealthy men and women who would have looked on to examine this young man. We don't know what it must have felt like to be publicly paraded in such a way. And we aren't told how it was to have those people shouting in a strange language, bidding for you, to take you into their home, and what thoughts must have gone through Joseph, whether is this master going to be good to me? Are they going to be bad to me? What are their intentions with me? Unable to know what they're even saying, perhaps. But what we do know is that wherever he was and whatever he did, God was going to be a blessing to Joseph, and he was going to be a blessing through Joseph. And so I want you to see this. Firstly, we see this at the beginning, in the beginning verses, in verses 1 to 6, when Joseph is in the house of Potiphar, the master, the Egyptian who buys him, and when Joseph is in the prison, in those last verses of verses 19 through to 23. And so let's see this in chapter 39. Firstly, God was a blessing to him. Here's a young man, Joseph. He's in a strange place. He's among a strange people, and he's speaking a strange language. Well, he's not speaking; they're speaking a strange language. Maybe to them, he was speaking a strange language. And also, he's in a place where they worship strange gods. He had been raised as the great-grandson of Abraham, the worshippers of Yahweh, the true living creator God. He's bought by a man called Potiphar. Potiphar, that very name speaks of idolatry. The name Potiphar means devoted to the sun. Here is an Egyptian god that Potiphar was born and raised to believe in and to worship and to bow down to. He is the captain of the guards. That means he is the chief of Pharaoh's own personal security guards. And he is the one and he is an Egyptian. He buys Joseph and brings him into this strange world now that he's going to live in. He brings him into his home. And what are we told there in verses 1 to 6? We're told that the Lord, verse 2, was with Joseph. He was with him. And do you know, even this idol-worshipping pagan Egyptian noticed that the Lord was with Joseph. You can see that in verse 3. His master saw that the Lord was with him. And we don't just see it in the house, in verse 2 and verse 3, but we also see it in the prison later on in verse 21. When Joseph is put into Pharaoh's own personal prison, where he puts all the traitors and rebels and treasonous men and women, we read in verse 21, the Lord was with Joseph. And with the Lord was steadfast love. God, even in the worst of places, even in the places that Joseph least expected to find him, God was with him, And God's steadfast love, his faithful love, was always being shown to him. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that marvellous? And that's a wonderful thing for us. We can be absolutely sure, if we're at home or abroad, if we're with many people or if we're alone, if we're in a strange place or a familiar place, if we're in a place that we love to be or a place that we never would have asked to be, God is with us. His presence working in us. His steadfast love not failing us. This has been the experience of many, many people in the history. This was the experience of Joseph. Has it been your experience? Has it been your experience? See, God was a blessing to him, but also God was a blessing through him. See, yes, wherever Joseph was, God was with him, but also whatever Joseph did, God helped him and made him succeed. You see that at verse 2 again. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of this Egyptian master. Verse 3, his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. And we see just again in the prison. In the prison, verse 21. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favour in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Verse 22. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. Verse 23. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him. Whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. The same is true in Potiphar's house. Potiphar doesn't have to think about all the daily tasks that would normally be found for a household manager. He can leave it all with Joseph, and all he has to think about is, what time am I eating? What was it that made Joseph so successful? Why was God doing this through Joseph? Why was God blessing these idol-worshipping, godless Egyptians? Well, because it was all about a promise God had made to Joseph's great-granddad. The promise you can find back in Genesis 12, where God calls Abraham to come and follow him to a land that he did not know. And he gives him this promise: I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonours you I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth, all the nations, will be blessed. You see, God gave him such success that Potiphar and the prison keeper were blessed by him. Yes, as God blessed Joseph, his blessings even overflow to the ungodly. Believer, do you realise that God has blessed you? God has blessed you if you are his child this morning. And he is making you a blessing to others, to the world around you. It is not something that necessarily you have to hope happens. It is something that is happening. Because Jesus Christ says about his people, what did he say to his disciples on the Sermon on the Mount? He said, you are salt, you are the light of the world. If we have been blessed by God, those blessings will overflow to the world around us. Do you realise that God has blessed you and is making you a blessing to others, those who you live with, those who you work with, those who you study with, those who you are in community with? That's why we read Ephesians 1 at the beginning of the service. We have received every heavenly and spiritual blessing in Jesus Christ. Don't live below your privileges this morning. You are blessed in God's sight. Yeah, these blessings, they include God's forgiveness, they include God's acceptance, they include God's presence through his Holy Spirit indwelling in you. But also he has blessed us with gifts. Gifts that he enables us to use in our church and in our community. So understand, wherever you go and whatever you do, you are to be bringing God's blessings because you are blessed. If God is with you, you will be blessed. But secondly, notice also that when God is with us, we will be tempted. We will be tempted. Now, here's the big dilemma for Joseph. Joseph has been told by God in chapter 37 in those dreams were God-given, that he is going to rise to prominence, that his brothers, his father, are going to come before him and bow down to him. And now the question is this: Joseph, how are you going to receive those blessings from God? Are you going to do it God's way, or are you going to go another way? You see, that is essentially what lays at the heart of temptation all the time. Are we going to find the blessing through God's ordained means, or are we going to try and take a shortcut, being deceived that blessing comes through that way, another way, a way without God, that may at times look, and often does look, easy? Only this was the same thing that Jesus faced, wasn't it? When he was in the wilderness and the devil tempts him. And one of the temptations is Satan saying to him, if you bow down and worship me, I will give you the whole world. What he was essentially saying is, don't go the way of the cross. Don't go the way that God has set for you. Come this way. It's easier. It's easier. No suffering, no rejection, no being despised by your fellow countrymen and by the world around you. No pain, no difficulty, no thorn, no thistle, no nail. Just bow down and worship me and you'll have it all. Well, just in the same way, like Jesus, Joseph resolves to go God's way. And how does he do it? Well, I want us to learn some lessons about temptation from Joseph here. Some temptations in verses 6 to 12. Firstly, I think we see temptation is personal. Temptation is personal. The devil will often come with personal temptations. Temptations that are unique to you. Yes, we're tempted that all temptations are common to us in one sense, but also in another sense, temptation is a personal thing. So look at the second half of verse 6. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Now, some of us might go, well, wouldn't that be wonderful if we were just handsome in form and appearance like Joseph? Of course, I'm sure many of you don't have that desire, but, some of us do. And what do we find? We discover that actually this is going to be the root of his temptation. This is going to be the root of his trouble, the root of his difficulty. There's going to be a temptation that is specifically for someone who is handsome in form and appearance. Now, look, I'm not trying to be flippant. I'm trying to persuade you of the point. Imagine if Joseph was ugly. Imagine if he was described as Isaiah describes the servant who was to come, there was nothing in his form or appearance that would attract anyone to him. Then this would not have happened. This temptation would not have come. But don't be deceived for a minute, another one would have. Something else would have. Because the devil has many schemes, not just one. And temptation, yes, it's the experience of all God's people, but all temptation is unique to each person. I wonder what your temptation is. What are you most liable to fall into? See, temptation is personal. But also we see that temptation is continual. Verse 7. Potiphar's wife casts her eyes on Joseph. She sees exactly what we've been told. He's handsome. And her demand while her husband and Joseph's master is out of the house, is that he comes with her and lies with her. That he enters with her a sexual relationship. Now look, this isn't just merely an affair we're talking about. This is a route to power. Joseph has already been placed in a position where he has everything in his master's house under his care and charge. He will even say to Potiphar's wife, there is no one that, what did he say? He says that my master has no concern about anything in the house. He has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me. See, Joseph saying this is not just a temptation to a sexual fling. This is a temptation to a route to prominence. Do you see it? So it's a temptation to take the easy way. Perhaps the wife was not just scheming for Joseph to be in her bed, but maybe for Joseph to be at her side as she took some prominence also. And when he refuses, what does she do? She doesn't give up. She speaks to him day after day. Verse 10. Day after day. Trying to wear him down, trying to persuade him, continually asking the same question, because we all know from when we're little, when we're about this high, don't we, that if you keep on asking, you might just get it. And don't be surprised when your temptation seems defeated, that it returns when you're least expecting it, again and again. It's a normal way of temptation. But then also temptation we find is resistible. It's some good news. It's resistible. Because what was Joseph's response to Potiphar's wife's daily advances? His response is to resist. And how does he do it? Well, I think there's two key things here. He is honest about the sinfulness of sin. He is honest about the sinfulness of sin. Look how he describes it in verse 9. He says, he is, talking of Potiphar, he is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness? He doesn't play down the sin. He doesn't say, well, it doesn't try to justify it. Well, it might not be that bad after all. Who's going to know? And, my brothers, I've had a hard life, And, God made me this way. And so, if he didn't want me to be handsome and have this temptation come in my life, then, well, I should just, he should have just made me ugly. No, he says, look, this is great wickedness. This is sinful. He calls it what it is. He sees it what it is. But more than that, he recognizes it's sin against God. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? He loves God. He loves God. And he sees that a violation against Potiphar is actually more seriously a violation against God. You see, temptation is best resisted when we recognize that we have been blessed by God, that he has done us good, that he has been generous towards us, that he is lovely, and to sin against anyone is to first and foremost sin against him. And as we love God in increasing measure, then let's hate sin in increasing measure too. Hating sin but not loving God will never help you against your temptations. It will never help. Some people, when they're battling against temptation, and particularly sexual temptation, will often talk about, well, you've got to avoid the sin, you've got to resist it, you've got to say no, you've got to put the barriers in place, you've got to get away. And it's not enough. It's not enough. because you empty the house of one and 10 others come in. No, you've got to empty the house and fill it with the love of God and greater desires for him. Temptation is resistible, but also temptation is escapable. The final advance is made, verse 11. One day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And what's Joseph's response? Joseph, he is radical, isn't he? She's got him by his garment. He's leaving the garment behind. He's running away. And he's not just going to stay near her, leave the garment and back off and go into another room. He leaves the garment, he flees, and he gets out of that house. What a radical thing to do. I wonder, we're not told, and I'm using some imagination, and I hope you can bear with me on this one. You can imagine him as he runs away, and I wonder if any of the servants in the field saw him running off. Wonder, what's that about? Why is Joseph running? But this is radical. And if we want to escape temptation, we need to be radical with it. Jesus didn't go less radical than Joseph. Jesus actually was more radical than Joseph. You remember what he said, don't you, in fighting against things that cause you to sin? What did he talk about with the right eye? If the right eye causes you to sin, he says, tear it out and throw it away. Now, yeah, I know it's hyperbole, but let's not downplay it. He's saying get radical. Get radical with the things that cause you to sin. Throw them away, flee from them, stay away from them, get as far away from them as you possibly can, because hell is real and sin is serious. But what about your right hand? If that causes you to sin, Jesus says again, cut it off. Throw it away. Joseph cuts off his garment and runs away. Temptation is escapable. Don't believe the lie that you cannot resist or you cannot escape your temptations. Because God is with you. And because God is with you, you are able to resist, you are able to say no, you are able to have success in your battle with sin, Satan, and temptation. James 4 verse 7 says, as you submit to God, resist the devil and what? He will flee from you. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13, Paul says, there is no temptation that has come against you that is too strong for you. But with every temptation, God has provided what? A way of escape. He provides a door for you to leave. God is with you even in your temptations. But don't think for a minute because you're tempted that you're any less a Christian, or that because you're tempted that this is a sign that God is not with you. Actually, temptation often comes when we are close with God, when we are blessed by God, when we are enjoying God with us. So be on your guard, because as God is blessing you, temptations inevitably follow. But then thirdly, when God is with us, we will be accused. We will be accused. Now, we might have expected, at this point, Joseph's virtue and Joseph's moral integrity to have been rewarded, wouldn't we? That's what we would expect. I know, you've read this story before, but look, if you knew it for the first time, you would know. You would think, this is good on Joseph. Surely this is going to be rewarded by God, right? No. In fact, an accusation's made against him. Potiphar's wife. She sees that the garment is gone. She keeps hold of it. And she thinks quickly. She's got some evidence. As she calls for the other servants to come in. And in order to persuade them of her story, she shows them the garment. Yet again, do you see a garment being used against Joseph? A garment being used for deception. By the way, just in case you're wondering if this is all against women, you need to go and read Genesis 38, which we skipped, and see how Judah is in the wrong against a righteous woman. Genesis 38. But she's got the garment, and she calls for the other servants to come in. She tells them some half-truths. She tells them some half-truths. She says, yes, he fled. He got out of the house. He left his garment behind. But she puts in a blatant lie. She says, he came to me and I cried out with a loud voice, and that made him spooked. She also tries to bring in others to her lie and her accusation. She tries to get them riled up using their racial bias. Do you see how skillful she is? She says, look, let's just look at this in verse 12. She called to the men of the house, verse 14, sorry. She called to the men of the household and said to them, see, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried out. He left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house. And then she does it again in verse 17. She told her husband the same story, saying, the Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. If he's laughing at me, he's laughing at you, Potiphar. This Hebrew you've brought in. You can't trust a Hebrew, she's saying. And the servants around her are brought in going, yeah, that's right. That's right, that Hebrew. We knew he was trouble from the beginning. See what she's doing in her false accusation? Her false accusations full of half-truths, full of biases designed to bring others in to defend her and fight her corner. And then she puts the blame on Potiphar. She puts the blame on him. It's his fault. It's your fault, Potiphar. What are you going to do about it? And so Potiphar is fueled with, his anger is kindled, and he takes Joseph and he brings him into his prison. Puts him into Pharaoh's prison. Now here's the question. What defense does Joseph make? We've seen the accusation. What's the defense? Anyone? Interesting. He doesn't make one. He doesn't make one. He's not recorded to. He will proclaim his innocence in chapter 40, but he's silent. He receives whatever punishment is being given to him. Who does that remind you of? Falsely accused before men of authority, believing the lies of others. Who does that remind you of? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, who like a lamb before the shearers is silent, opened not his mouth. Brothers and sisters, sometimes the evidence that God is with you is that people will speak against you, and they will speak against you falsely. We like to think that the evidence that God is with us would be that everyone speaks well of us, wouldn't we? But we know from Joseph, we know from Moses, we know from David, we know from Job, we know from Jesus, that just isn't the case. That often, when God is with us and God is blessing us, there will be false accusations made against us. Don't be surprised if this is our experience as a church or your experience as an individual. So where was God? Where was God when Joseph was in the house? Where was God when Joseph was in the midst of temptation? Where was God when Joseph was being thrown into the prison? Where was God? God was working out all of his plans and purposes for the saving of many lives. God was right there with Joseph. As Joseph is falsely accused, as he's thrown into the prison belonging to the king of Egypt, I'm sure he would have preferred to have got out another way, to go into the palace another way, to get to Pharaoh another way, to rise to prominence another way. But he never, ever complains. God would work in this same way for our salvation, as the false accusations condemned Jesus to death. And in his condemnation, we have received pardon from a gracious God for our every sin and the guarantee of heaven. Do you still doubt that God is with you? Do you still doubt that whatever you're facing today, whatever situation you're in, God is with you? Look to Jesus Christ and know that whether you're heading for the prison or the palace, God in Christ is with you to bless you now and forever. We're going to sing a song that speaks of our inability and our